I thought the worst part was finding out my wife was cheating on me, until I saw who she was in bed with. That moment changed everything. I never thought I'd be the one posting something like this, but I guess life has a way of catching you off guard. Honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened. But here goes nothing. This is my story. My wife, Rachel, and I had been together for a little over 10 years. We first crossed paths back in college, your typical campus romance. She stood out immediately. Rachel was sharp, driven, had this spark in her that pulled people in without trying. I think I got caught up in that energy before I even realized I was falling for her. We tied the knot not long after graduation. I was 25, she was 23. Like most couples, we had our fair share of struggles, but I always believed we had a strong foundation. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that. In the past several months, something had shifted. It was subtle at first. She started acting more distant, more private. But Rachel had always been a little reserved, so I didn't press too hard. Then the late nights started piling up. She said it was all work. Her job in marketing could get pretty hectic and late meetings weren't anything new. Still, something about the way she acted made me uneasy. She grew defensive, even irritated, when I'd ask about her day. That wasn't like her. At the time, I tried to rationalize it. Told myself she was probably stressed out, maybe just hitting a rough patch. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But then she started making these comments, offhand, almost teasing, but there was a sting behind them. Things like how I didn't get her world anymore, or how I'd fallen behind. She'd laugh it off, but it didn't feel like a joke. That's when I started paying closer attention. You hear people say that once you suspect something, you notice all the little signs, and man, that's real. Her phone was always flipped over, on silent. She started dressing up a lot more for what she called girls' nights. She'd get cagey if I so much as glanced at her laptop. Still, I kept telling myself I was reading too much into it, that I was imagining things. Then came the night everything changed. It was a Friday and Rachel said she had plans with some folks from work. Nothing unusual, at least on the surface. But something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. She'd been out more than she'd been home lately, leaving at dawn and getting back long after dark. Every time I tried to talk about it, she'd either make light of it or turn the tables and say I was being too sensitive. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I actually called her. No text, just a straightforward phone call. Straight to voicemail. Okay, maybe her phone had died, I thought. Happens. I waited a while, tried again. Still voicemail. By that point, my chest was tight and my mind was racing. I tried to calm myself down, told myself not to jump to the worst-case scenario. But I couldn't shake the feeling. So, I gave in to that uneasy gut instinct and opened up the Find My app we both had set up years ago. Just a safety thing for when she was working late. Her location popped up instantly. She wasn't at the bar she'd mentioned. She wasn't even remotely close to her office. Her pin was in a quiet residential area on the far side of town. I just stared at my screen, confused and more than a little shaken. We didn't know anyone in that area. There was no reason for her to be there. I waited. Told myself there might be an explanation. Maybe she went to a coworker's house, or there was some impromptu gathering. But the hours dragged on. Midnight came and went and still nothing from her. No text, no call. Then, a little after 1 a.m. she came home. Cool as ever. Come. Like she'd just come back from a quiet dinner, not a mysterious night in an unfamiliar part of town. She smiled like I was the one being ridiculous for staying up. When I asked how the evening went, she brushed it off with something vague. Just drinks, a few laughs, nothing major. No mention of where she'd actually been. I didn't bring up the location thing right away. I couldn't. I had no hard proof, and part of me didn't want to confront a truth I wasn't ready to accept. That night, lying there beside her, I barely slept. My thoughts were tangled, racing, trying to make sense of what felt like the beginning of something I didn't want to face. And unfortunately, my gut had been right all along. The following days felt foggy, like I was just going through the motions. I couldn't stop replaying that night. Couldn't ignore how easily she'd lied to me, or how convincingly. At the same time, I was second-guessing myself. We'd built so much together, shared so many years. How could I believe she was hiding something so big? Then the moment came. It was a Tuesday morning. She'd left in a hurry for an early meeting, and for once, I had the day off. Her laptop was still open on the kitchen counter. Just sitting there, screen glowing. The temptation hit me like a wave. My heart was pounding, palms sweaty as I stood there staring at it. Let me be clear, I was never the kind of husband who snooped around or tried to dig through my wife's personal stuff. But that morning, something inside me just broke loose. Every instinct I had was yelling at me to look. So I did. And the first thing I saw when I opened her messages was a thread with someone named Ryan. A name I'd never heard before. My hands were trembling as I scrolled up. At first it seemed innocent, chats about work, random stuff. But then the tone shifted. It got flirtier, more suggestive. And then I saw it, messages hinting at their last time together. That's when my whole world seemed to cave in. It felt like someone had kicked the air right out of my lungs. My chest went tight, my thoughts blank. There it was. The doubts I'd been pushing aside, the weird behavior, the cold distance. It all came into sharp, undeniable focus. But I still didn't know who this Ryan guy was. Rachel had never once mentioned him. I stood there in shock, every part of me screaming to just confront her, to throw the laptop across the room, to demand answers. But I couldn't, not yet. I needed more. I needed to understand the full picture before I did something I couldn't take back. So when Rachel got home that evening, I played it cool. I pretended everything was fine. Made dinner, asked her about her day, smiled when I had to, all the while I was breaking on the inside. The only thing running through my head was Ryan. Who was he? How long had this been going on? I barely slept that night. My thoughts were a mess and the pain was eating me alive. What hurt even more was how normal she acted. No sign of guilt, no nervousness. If anything, she seemed lighter, happier. Like the weight she'd been carrying had vanished, while mine had just begun to settle in. I knew I couldn't go on like that. I had to find out who Ryan was. I had to see the full picture, even if it crushed me. And as much as I thought I was getting close to the truth, nothing could have prepared me for what came next. The days that followed were torture. I couldn't stop thinking about Rachel and this guy. Every laugh she let out at her phone, every early morning or late night, it all made me sick. I was constantly on edge, dissecting every move she made. Then one night I caught a break. She said she was going out again with her friends. Same pattern, done up, makeup flawless, hair done like she was heading to a gala instead of a casual evening. But this time something felt different. She was practically rushing out the door. I couldn't sit at home and lose my mind again, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her. Yeah, I know how that sounds. But when you've been lied to over and over and your heart's on the line, you'll do things you swore you never would. She drove across town, right back to that same quiet neighborhood I'd seen on the location tracker weeks earlier. I parked a few houses down and waited, nerves shot, hoping I was wrong. Hoping she'd just walk into a girlfriend's house and I could go home and tell myself I was crazy. But that didn't happen. About an hour later, she came outside, holding hands with a man. They weren't just chatting or hugging, it was intimate. Comfortable. Like they'd done this 100 times. I couldn't see him clearly at first, but I knew this wasn't just some work friend. Then she leaned in and kissed him. And when he turned, I finally saw his face. I felt my whole body lock up. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some random guy she'd met at work. It was Brian, one of my closest friends. Brian and I had been tight for years. We met through work, clicked immediately. He was one of the few people I genuinely trusted. We'd gone on road trips together, had countless barbecues. He helped me move into our first house. And now he was with my wife. I didn't know what to do. I sat frozen in my car, watching the two of them laugh and kiss like they didn't have a care in the world. Like I didn't exist. The betrayal hit me in waves. It was like getting knocked down over and over again. First Rachel, then Brian. Two people I cared deeply about, acting like everything we'd built together meant nothing. They stood there talking for a while, then went back inside. I just stayed there, numb, staring at my steering wheel like it could give me answers. Rachel had been lying to me for nearly 3 years, and the man she was doing it with was one of the last people I ever expected. When I finally pulled away and drove home, I barely remember the ride. My vision was blurred, not from tears but from pure disbelief. I felt like I was drowning, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get a breath in. I knew I couldn't keep this bottled up much longer. The next morning, the reality came crashing down the second I opened my eyes. Rachel was already in the kitchen like it was any other day. Smiling. Making coffee. Acting like she hadn't just shattered my world into pieces the night before. I didn't say anything, yet. I wasn't ready to blow up. But the anger was right there under the surface, burning hot. I spent most of that day pacing, replaying the scene over and over in my head. The kiss. The way she looked at him. The way Brian touched her like he belonged in her life more than I did. And still I couldn't figure it out. How could she betray me like that? How could he? That evening, after the usual small talk and the clinking of dishes in the sink, something inside me finally gave out. I remember gripping the edge of the counter, feeling the coolness of it under my hands, just trying to keep myself grounded. Rachel was across the room, scrolling casually through her phone like it was just another night. My voice cut through the silence, sharper than I meant it to be. So, how was your night with the girls? I asked, my tone a little too even. She looked up, smiling, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Oh, it was nice. Just the usual, some drinks, catching up, nothing special. That was it. That was the moment I broke. Is that what you call it now? I said, my voice cold, the anger just barely kept in check. Catching up with my friend Brian? Her expression changed instantly. The color drained from her face, and for a second I could see it, the panic in her eyes before she tried to pull herself together. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice shaky, trying to sound confused. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Rachel, don't. I saw you. I was there last night. I saw you with him, I said, my hands trembling as the words came out. Tell me how long this has been going on. She stood there, frozen. Her mouth open like she was going to say something, but no words came out. The confident, composed version of her vanished. She just looked defeated. Say something, I shouted, slamming my palm down on the kitchen table. She jumped at the sound. How long have you been lying to me? After what felt like forever, she finally whispered, almost 3 years. My legs almost gave out. 3 years. That's how long the woman I built a life with had been seeing someone behind my back. And not just anyone, Brian. My friend. Why? My voice cracked, this time not from rage but pure heartbreak. Why him? Why anyone? She dropped her gaze to the floor and just stood there for a while before answering. It wasn't supposed to happen, she muttered. It happened. Things between us weren't the same anymore, and Brian, he understood me in ways you didn't. Understood you? I said, stunned. You destroyed everything. You didn't just betray me, you tore apart 2 relationships. Was it worth it? Was it really worth it for someone who understood you? She didn't respond. She couldn't. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed air, space, anything but that house. Without saying another word, I grabbed my jacket and stormed out the front door. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the steering wheel as I got into the car. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there another second. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours. Streetlights blurred past as I replayed everything in my head. Every laugh they shared when I wasn't looking, every late night she blamed on work, every moment I should have seen but didn't. It was like I'd been living in someone else's life this whole time. Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot. It was quiet, the kind of silence that feels loud when your thoughts are screaming. I sat there in the dark, trying to make sense of the wreckage that used to be my life. My phone started lighting up after a while. Message after message from Rachel. She kept saying we needed to talk, that we could still work through this. But what was there to work through? What do you salvage from something so broken? I couldn't bring myself to answer. So I drove to my brother Mark's place. He lived on the other side of town, and I hadn't called him yet. But I knew he'd be up, he always was. I called from outside. The second he heard my voice, I didn't even have to explain. He just said, "Come in, man," and opened the door. When I stepped inside, I must have looked like I'd been through a war. He took one look at me and said, "Man, what happened?" I tried to stay composed, but as soon as I sat down on his couch, everything just poured out. I told him about Rachel, about Brian, about how long it had been going on. And the more I talked, the more it felt real. The more it sank in. He didn't interrupt, just sat there listening, his expression hard to read. When I finally finished, he let out a breath. "Brian? You're Brian? I mean, that's unreal. I don't even know what to say." "I should have seen it," I said, wiping my face. "They were doing this under my nose the whole time." "How didn't I see it?" Mark shook his head. "That's not on you. They lied. They knew exactly what they were doing and they did it anyway. That's not your fault." I crashed on his couch that night. I didn't want to be anywhere near that house, near her. My phone kept buzzing, but I couldn't even look at it. I wasn't ready to face Rachel, and the thought of confronting Brian made my blood boil all over again. The next morning, I woke up to another flood of messages from Rachel. What started as apologies quickly morphed into explanations, or at least her version of them. She said she felt alone in our marriage, that Brian had been there when I wasn't. Reading those words made me feel sick. It was like she was flipping the blame, making it seem like I'd driven her into his arms. I could feel my blood boiling. And as much as I wanted to shut it all out, I knew I couldn't hide from this anymore. I needed to face Brian. I had to hear it straight from him. No more lies. No more cowardly excuses hiding behind texts. So I called him. He picked up after a couple of rings, his voice light and casual. Hey man. What's going on? I didn't even try to soften it. We need to talk. In person. There was a beat of silence. Then, yeah. About what? You know what it's about. I'll be at your place in an hour. I didn't wait for him to respond. I hung up, climbed into my car and gripped the wheel so tight I thought it might snap. My thoughts were racing, rage, disbelief, heartbreak, all tangled into one storm that I could barely hold back. The drive to his place felt like it took forever. Every red light was a reminder of what I was about to face. This wasn't just about Rachel anymore. This was about Brian, the friend I'd trusted like a brother, driving a knife through my back. When I pulled into his driveway, I sat in the car for a minute, forcing myself to breathe. My heart was pounding and I was trying like hell not to let it explode out of my chest. I needed to stay calm, at least long enough to get the truth. I walked up to his door and knocked. When he opened it, his face changed the second he saw me. He knew. The weight of it hit him instantly. His usual confidence melted right off his face. "Come in," he said quietly. I followed him into his living room. The silence between us was thick, the kind that presses down on your chest. He motioned toward the couch, but I stayed standing. I wasn't here to sit and chat. I was here for answers. "So," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "when exactly were you going to tell me? Or were you just planning to keep sneaking around with my wife for the rest of your life?" He looked down, ran a hand over the back of his neck. I don't know what to say, man. I'm sorry." "Sorry?" I shot back. "You don't get to be sorry. Not after everything." He looked up at me, finally, and I saw the guilt written all over his face. But it didn't mean a thing. That guilt didn't undo anything. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said, his voice barely audible. "We were both in a bad place, one thing led to another and it just got out of control. I never meant for it to be like this." I cut him off. "A bad place? So that makes it okay to betray me? To lie to me for 3 years? You think that justifies what you did?" He winced and nodded slowly. "No, it doesn't. I know it doesn't. I wish I could undo it, but I can't. I trusted you, Brian. You were like family." My voice cracked, not from anger anymore but from everything else. Disappointment, heartbreak, disbelief. "You came into my home, shared drinks with me, laughed with me, and the whole time you were stabbing me in the back." "I didn't plan to hurt you," he said. "I swear. It just got to a point where I didn't know how to stop." I stepped closer, my fists tight at my sides. Was she just a fling? Or was it more than that? He hesitated. That pause was the worst part. He looked me in the eye, and that pause told me everything before he even opened his mouth. "It wasn't just a fling," he said finally. And there it was. The words didn't just sting, they gutted me. It wasn't just lust or bad decisions. There were feelings involved. It was real to him. "You love her," I whispered. He didn't deny it. He didn't need to. "I didn't want to fall for her," he said quietly. "But yeah, I do. I didn't expect it and I never meant for this to happen." I stared at him, numb. "So what now? You and Rachel live happily ever after while I pick up the pieces of the life you both destroyed." He shook his head, but there was nothing left to say. No apology, no explanation could fix this. I turned and walked toward the door. "We're done," I said without looking back. "You're dead to me." And just like that, I walked out of his house, knowing there was no going back. I could feel the rage rising, pulsing in my chest like it was about to burst, but I didn't let it. As much as I wanted to throw him against the wall, to make him feel even a fraction of what I was feeling, I held back. I wasn't going to lose control. Not in front of him. Instead, I turned to leave, each step heavier than the last. But just before I reached the door, I stopped. I looked back at him, and for a second I wasn't angry, I was just empty. "You two deserve each other," I said, my voice low and steady. "But don't think for a second that I'll ever forget what you've done. You destroyed everything. I hope it was worth it." And then I walked out. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't care to hear any more excuses. I slammed the door behind me and left that chapter behind, at least for now. Getting into my car, I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. The adrenaline was still rushing, but underneath it all, I was just drained. Completely and utterly exhausted. I had faced the man who tore my life apart, and now all I wanted was space. To breathe, to think, to figure out what pieces were even left to pick up. Because there was no denying it anymore. My life as I knew it was shattered. My marriage, my friendships, my trust, it was all gone. And there was no fixing it. I drove around for a while, not really knowing where I was going. The roads all blurred together and my thoughts felt like they were moving in circles. Every word he'd said, every glance, every pause, It all replayed over and over in my head. I kept wondering if I should have seen it sooner, if there was ever a moment where I could have stopped this before it spiraled out of control. Eventually, I found myself back at the house. And the second I pulled into the driveway, that sick feeling in my stomach returned. I wasn't ready to face Rachel, not after what I'd just heard, not after what I'd just said. But I couldn't avoid it forever. I stepped inside and everything felt off. The air was heavy, too quiet. No sound from the kitchen, no TV, no footsteps upstairs. Just this eerie stillness, like the house itself was holding its breath. I called her name once. Nothing. I started toward the stairs, each step making that dread in my chest grow stronger. I wasn't ready, but I didn't have a choice. Then I heard it. Voices. Laughter. A bed creaking. At first I froze, confused, unsure if I was hearing things. But then came the unmistakable sounds. She wasn't alone. And it wasn't just talking. My body went cold. I walked down the hallway, heart pounding in my ears. The door to our bedroom, the one we shared for years, was open just a crack. I pushed it slowly, and what I saw on the other side broke me in ways I didn't know I could break. Rachel. In bed. With another man. They hadn't even noticed me. They were too wrapped up in each other, tangled in the sheets, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. It wasn't Brian. It was someone else. A stranger. For a second I just stood there, staring, trying to convince myself this wasn't real, that my eyes were playing tricks on me, that I hadn't just caught my wife with another man in our bed again. But it was real, and it hit like a punch to the chest. What the hell is this? I finally managed to say, my voice rough and shaking with fury. They both froze. Rachel looked up and went white as a sheet. She scrambled to pull the blanket over herself, eyes wide with panic. Mike, she stuttered. The guy beside her looked like a deer caught in headlights. He grabbed for his clothes without saying a word. I stepped further into the room. You couldn't even wait, could you? I said, the anger boiling over. You're not just cheating with Brian, you're bringing strangers into our home now? Please let me explain, she started. Explain? I snapped. What exactly is there to explain? That I was stupid enough to believe this was just one mistake? That while I was out confronting the man who ruined our friendship, you were upstairs in our bed with some guy I don't even know? She didn't answer. She couldn't. I turned to the man who had just about finished throwing his clothes on. Get out, I said. Now. He didn't argue. He bolted, barely looking at me. When he was gone, I turned back to her. She was crying now, tears streaking her face. But it didn't touch me. Not this time. You don't get to cry, I said, my voice quieter but sharper. You don't get to fall apart now, not after everything. You lied. You cheated. And now I see it wasn't just Brian. It was whoever, whenever. I never meant to hurt you, she said through her sobs. I shook my head, bitter and broken. You didn't just hurt me, Rachel. You destroyed everything. You turned our marriage into something I don't even recognize anymore. Do you even see what you've done? She couldn't answer. And for the first time, I didn't wait for her to try. I want you out, I said, the words cold and flat but clear as glass. Pack your things and get out of this house. We're done. Rachel looked up at me, tears streaking her face, but I didn't feel a thing. Not anymore. Whatever sympathy I might have had was buried under everything she'd done. She made her choices. I wasn't going to stick around and be her safety net, her fallback when things didn't work out with her latest fling. I didn't wait for her to speak. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me like I was sealing a casket. As I stepped outside, a strange sensation hit me, relief. It didn't wash away the pain or the betrayal, but it was something. The truth was finally out in the open. No more pretending, no more lies whispered through clenched teeth. I could finally move forward, without her, without the weight of what she'd turned our life into. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and painful clarity. I couldn't even set foot in the house after that night. I stayed with my brother, trying to make sense of it all, trying to rebuild my sense of self after everything had been torn apart. Every time I shut my eyes, I'd see her in that bed, laughing with a stranger, like none of it meant anything to her. And maybe it didn't. But I wasn't the only one she broke. Brian had kept his distance since I confronted him, which was fine by me. I figured I'd heard the last of him. Then, out of nowhere, he called. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, or maybe just a desire to see how much worse things could get, got the better of me. His voice was quiet, tired. Hey man, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I found out something else. About Rachel. I leaned back in the kitchen chair, already bracing for another hit. What could possibly make this worse, Brian? He took a deep breath. She's been cheating on me too. That sentence didn't even register at first. I sat there in silence, not sure I'd heard him right. What? I finally asked, stunned. I found messages. Another guy. Someone else she's been seeing. I don't know for how long. I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I blinked, processing what he just said. She hadn't only lied to me. She'd been cheating on him too. It was like betrayal came naturally to her. Like loyalty had never even entered the picture. You too, huh? I muttered, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Guess we were both just her stepping stones. Brian's voice cracked a little. I really thought it meant something. I thought she was different. But I was wrong. We both were. Yeah, I said. Welcome to the wreckage. There was a pause before he spoke again. I'm leaving her. I can't live in this anymore. I should have walked away a long time ago. You're doing the right thing, I told him. I'm filing for divorce. Saying the words out loud for the first time hit me hard. Not in a painful way, but in a freeing way. I had clung to a marriage that had died long ago. And now I was finally letting it go. I'm sorry, Brian said after a pause. I was wrong. About everything. I never should have crossed that line. I'll carry that guilt forever. But I'm glad you're getting out. You deserve better than this. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you, I admitted. But yeah, I'm done with all of it. After that call, I set up a meeting with a divorce attorney. Sitting across from a lawyer talking about assets and agreements felt surreal, like I was signing away a business deal, not the life I'd built with someone I once loved. When he asked about infidelity, I didn't hold back. I told him everything, about Brian, about the stranger in our bed, and about the messages Brian had found. Given what you've told me, he said, glancing at the paperwork, you've got a strong case. This should go fairly smoothly, legally speaking. Legally speaking, I echoed. There was nothing smooth about having your heart ripped out and handed back to you in pieces. But still, it was a step forward. The weeks that followed were mechanical. Paperwork, property lists, cold, factual conversations about the dismantling of a marriage. Rachel didn't try to fight it. She knew she had no leg to stand on. She sent a few messages, apologies, explanations, the same tired words she'd used 100 times. I didn't respond. I owed her nothing now. Eventually, I went back to the house one last time to gather the rest of my things. She wasn't there, but her shadow still lingered in every corner. I moved quickly, not wanting to stay a second longer than I had to. Before I left, I paused in the doorway of our bedroom. The bed was still unmade, sheets wrinkled, covers tossed. It looked like she'd just stopped caring. Or maybe she never cared at all. I stood there, staring at the space where everything unraveled. Then I turned, walked out, and shut the door behind me for the last time. The divorce went through quicker than I expected. It was like snapping a cord that had been fraying for years, sudden, quiet, and strangely clean. Just like that, I was free. Brian left her too. Word got around through a few mutual acquaintances that he packed up and walked away, no looking back. In the end, Rachel was left with exactly what she'd built for herself: ashes. The lies, the betrayal, the hearts she'd broken, it all caught up to her. No husband. No lover. Just the echo of everything she destroyed. And honestly, I didn't feel sorry for her. She made her bed. She chose to burn every bridge. She had to live in the wreckage she created. The weight I'd been carrying, the constant pain that had lived in my chest for months, started to lift. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it brought clarity. Closure. I could breathe again, and for the first time in years, I knew I was finally done with her. I had no idea what the road ahead would look like, but I knew one thing for certain: I would never let someone like Rachel have that kind of power over me again. I was moving on. She was just a chapter one had survived. After the papers were signed, life didn't magically get easier. It was slow, quiet, and strange. But there was peace in the silence. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't living in a fog of suspicion, heartbreak, and pain. I wasn't staring at my phone, waiting for an excuse or another lie. I was rebuilding from the ground up. Then, a few weeks later, I got a call from someone I hadn't talked to in a while. A friend from town who hadn't been involved in the drama but had clearly heard some of it. You heard about Rachel? He asked cautiously. I hadn't. I'd blocked her on everything. Cut every tie. What happened? He hesitated. She's not doing well. Word is she's not working, not seeing anyone. She's kind of fallen off the map. People say she's alone, completely. No friends, no real support. Just kind of there. I didn't say anything at first. I expected to feel something, anger, maybe vindication. But I didn't. Just this strange emptiness. Like hearing the ending to a story you stopped caring about. Well, I finally said, you can't destroy everything around you and expect to walk away untouched. She brought this on herself. He didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. After we hung up, I found myself thinking about her. Not with longing, but with disbelief. Who was she now? What went through her mind when she realized she'd lost everyone? I didn't know. And I reminded myself, it didn't matter. I'd already escaped that wreck. I wasn't going back. Brian had moved on too. We weren't close anymore, which was probably for the best. We exchanged a few texts, some awkward half-apologies and loose ends, but the friendship was gone. I didn't hate him, not anymore. I just didn't have anything left to give. And Rachel? She tried reaching out to people, but no one was answering anymore. Her name had become something people whispered about. Everyone knew the story now. In a small town, stories stick. People talk. And they weren't talking kindly. One night, I drove past our old house. I don't know why, I wasn't trying to see her and I didn't stop. I guess I just needed that one final look, a glimpse of the life I'd once believed in. The place looked dark. Empty. It didn't feel like a home anymore. Just a house filled with echoes. I stared for a moment from the street, remembering the good moments, the laughs, the dreams that never came true. And then I drove away. Something shifted in me that night. The anger had faded and what was left behind wasn't pain, it was something lighter. Not peace exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. I wasn't all the way healed, but I wasn't broken anymore either. Life kept moving. I threw myself into work. Spent time with people who actually cared. Found strength in places I didn't know existed. I was still picking up the pieces, but every day I was putting them back together, my way. I'd hear things from time to time. That Rachel was barely getting by. That she'd lost touch with nearly everyone. That she was a shell of who she used to be. And I didn't feel the need to reach out. I didn't owe her that. What she took from me I can never get back. But what I gained, resilience, clarity, peace, I earned on my own. Looking back now, I realized the hardest part wasn't losing Rachel. It was losing the version of me that thought I needed her to be whole. But I survived. I grew. I rebuilt. And that's something no one can take away from me.